So I'm not adding any clothes to my wardrobe in 2024, and oh, it has been a journey. I find myself in August, and I'm not gonna lie, a little bored. Not like awfully bored, just like a little bit bored. And it made me think about all the clothes in my wardrobe that I wasn't wearing and why. I got really microscopic, really geeky about why exactly I wasn't wearing these garments. So in this video, I wanted to show you how I've altered 4 of the dresses in my wardrobe so that I will actually wear them. Are they always the choices that other people would make? Do they formally make the dresses better? Probably not, but for me and the functions that I use them for, I think I've made them perfect. Now, some of this might be sacrilege. There are some expensive dresses here that I have altered, and honestly, not very skillfully, but I'm really happy with the outcome, and I thought in this video I could show you what I did so that you could get inspired about maybe altering the stuff that you already own to make it work better for you. No judgment, no high skill involved, just some beginner hands, a very basic sewing machine, and some dreams. So the first dress I took my scissors to is this 90s style denim maxi dress you might remember from my video on finding the perfect denim dress. This didn't end up being the perfect denim dress, but I wanted to keep it anyway because I really liked the shape of the top. As the time has gone on though, I really thought that I would become more comfortable with the way it fitted me on my bottom half. But as my weight has fluctuated up and down, and just my confidence as well, I've just realised that I'm just never going to wear this dress unless I make it comfortable for me. And that's okay. I don't have to be there. I don't have to show every curve of my body to live a happy and fulfilled life. And I don't see why I shouldn't have clothes that just leave me alone. And so basically the point of altering this dress was to make it leave me alone, make it so that I could enjoy the parts of the dress that I really loved, and altered the parts that I didn't. So I whipped out my scissors and I decided to cut. Now, the original plan was to cut off kind of like at the waist-ish and then use the extra fabric to ruffle a little bit and make a shorter skirt, because if I had less length, I had more fabric to play with to make like a shorter skirt that was a little bit ruffled and therefore like more comfortable for me. However, as I was cutting this dress, I'd like ironed it out, I'd made my marks, I was like, this is where I'm gonna cut. At the very last minute, I was like, what if this skirt was diagonal? And I just thought in that moment that I was a genius. Like, I was like, this is the best plan ever. I'm totally gonna cut it diagonal. I cut it diagonal, which, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed, I don't regret, but it did mean that I didn't actually have enough fabric from the rest of the dress to complete a skirt. Does that make sense? Because I'd taken more fabric out of, like, I hadn't taken as much fabric as I thought I would out of the waist because I was leaving a bit of it for this diagonal bit. And it meant that the original plan would no longer be viable. However, I had this remnant fabric. Let me show you. Remnant just means like leftover in a fabric shop, like the ends of something. So this is a remnant chambray fabric that kind of looks quite denim-y, but is actually a little bit of a kind of thinner cotton. And this one has a print of a lightning bolt on it. I found it on Vinted a few months ago for really, I think I paid about £4 for 1.3 meters, really cheap. And I was thinking about making it into a top or something like that. And as immediately, well, maybe, okay, it wasn't immediately. After a little 5-minute sit down and a tea and a don't get angry at yourself, you haven't ruined the whole project, little pep talk, I remembered that I had that fabric in my cupboard. And I was like, I wonder if I could make this an 80s dress. So I put my big girl pants on, I got to work, and I guessed how long I wanted the skirt to be, basically by eye, and gave it a little ruffle, whipped out my denim needle for my sewing machine, which I've never used before, very exciting, and I ended up sewing the skirt into a little ruffle at the bottom of the dress, at a diagonal. I was thinking of cutting off to be straight, but then I was like, nah, actually, I just think we should lean into the diagonal at this point. So we did, and I also sewed kind of around the bottom zip, which I'd never done before, but that seemed to all be okay as well. I just kind of cut the zip off a little bit higher than it usually would, and I could still get into it, it was fine. So that was all good. And then I realised that I wanted to make it look a bit more symmetrical. I liked the way it looked with the skirt, but I wanted more. And I also really wanted some sleeves, and I had a little bit of extra fabric left over. So instead of making a very complicated arm pattern, which I'm frankly not qualified to do, I instead just used a method that I learned in the DIY Sew It Yourself DIY Daisy book. And I just made rectangles that turned into ruffle sleeves. And at the bottom, I threaded in some very comfortable, non-pinchy elastic for my little poof arms that made it into a bit of an 80s prom number. Ideally, I would have had the arms longer, but I frankly just ran out of material. And honestly, I know this is the first, I don't want to toot my horn too early in this video, but I think this turned out really well. I'm really happy with it. I feel much more comfortable in it. I wish I'd had enough fabric. Maybe I should have put pockets on it, but then I also thought that maybe pockets would be a bit complicated because of the angles and stuff. So maybe I'll go back and give it pockets. But apart from that, I'm going to give this cutting fiasco, what am I calling it, like a reinvention, I'm going to give this like an 8 out of 10 because I could have done it a little bit more neatly on the inside, but apart from that, I'm so happy with this dress. I'm so happy I did it. I think it looks ridiculous in the best possible way. And I can say for certain that nobody else has a dress like this. The second adjustment I made was short, but rather scandalous. Now, I was sent a few years ago this dress by Sonderfleur. They're a completely ethical and sustainable brand, which means that their prices are quite high. These dresses retail for about £250 each, I think. And this one was pure linen and so beautifully made, you have no idea. Like, this is the perfect dress in all ways. So why did I cut it up? Well, I realised that I wasn't wearing this dress because it has these really floofy sleeves, which are really nice and whoosh, but it meant that most of the time I couldn't wear a jacket or a shirt or layer it or anything else. And I kind of, in the summer, because I'd want to wear it in the summer as well as the winter, I wore it a little bit in the winter, but because of the sleeves, that you can't put anything over it. And then in the summer, it's a little bit too warm. So I was like, I'm just going to lean into this as a layering piece instead. And for it to be a layering piece, the sleeves need to go. This was so scary because it is such a well-made, beautiful dress. And it did feel a little bit like sacrilege. But I knew in the long run, I would wear it a lot more if it didn't have sleeves. So I got my seam ripper out and I treated it like a lady. I did it really, really gently. I just eased off the sleeves. And there they are, they're gone. Now, the part that, in retrospect, I kind of regret, but also a learning thing, is that, right, when you make a normal sleeve, if you don't sew this, I'm just going to tell you, when you make a normal sleeve, you usually bind the outer part of it so that it can stretch around your arm, so that it's got a bit of moving room. You kind of bind it with a different piece of fabric, which is a little bit more stretchy. Basically, I thought I was better than that. I thought I was better than the rules. I thought I'm just going to hem it and just turn them in. And, you know, linen is a very movable, like flexible fabric. It'll eventually just fall into place. It'll be fine. I was so wrong. I did the first hemming, which was basically just like a zigzag stitch, and I folded it in, and it was falling really weirdly. And also I realised that I probably needed to do it one more time because the sleeve was too long here. So I did, and these were the results. And I don't think it's like the worst thing that I've ever done to humanity. Let's take a brief break from thinking about my mistakes to thinking about something I don't regret, which is starting the Gumption Club. If you haven't looked at my Patreon recently, I have rejigged all the tiers to make it even more delicious. We have monthly playlists of the songs that I'm listening to right now, monthly watch lists of like good videos on YouTube, so you don't have to waste your time trawling through the whole of the internet to find the good stuff. And I'm even showing some of my never before published poems. We also have a new Discord server, which has a really cute Gumption clubhouse. We have a living room. We have a kitchen where we talk about what food we're cooking. We have a stereo system where we gather around and talk about music. We've obviously got a library where we talk about books, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So if you want to take a look and you've considered becoming a patron before, I have a link in the description where you can find out how to join. Okay, back to my mistakes. It looks way worse when it's on the hanger. When it's on, in my opinion, unless you're a sewist or like a contrarian, you aren't really going to notice that this is quite puckered. But I know that it is, and I didn't get the alteration right, and I should have gone and made my own bias binding or bought some bias binding. But at the time, I was really hot. I just wanted a dress that would let my armpits breathe. So at the moment, I'm just wearing it as it is. I don't think it's going to damage the dress in any way. And if I do want to go back, what's good about sewing is you can always unpick your mistakes. So if I do want to go back later in the year when I've got some more time and redo those with some proper binding, I can. But for now, I'm wearing it as it is. I'm owning it. I'm giving myself a 2 out of 10 for this alteration, if I'm honest, because it was supposed to be the simplest one and I seem to have fucked it up in some way. But I see it as a learning curve, and it also has taught me a lesson. Like, sometimes you get told what the function of something is, but until you just skip a step, you don't really value and understand why it's there. So I'm just treating it like that. Okay, so it's fine. The third alteration that I did was a really simple one. I unpicked the side seams of this dress, which is perfect in every single way, apart from the fact that it doesn't have pockets. And in the summer, I want to leave the house without a bag and I want to put my phone and my keys somewhere. I deserve that, god damn it. So I used this stencil from the DIY Daisy book to cut out some pocket pieces from some scrap fabric that I'd got from Mary Benson, which is another sustainable brand that often just sell off their scraps so that they don't go to waste. So these really cool, like really brilliantly bold bits of fabric I got to use for the pockets. I zigzag stitched them and then I pieced them together so that they were in line where the dress should be. And you kind of, when you do pockets in sewing, you have to sew them inside out and then you kind of put it's hard to explain, but then you basically sew them outwards and then you can fold them back in. So anyway, I did all that, but I realised that when I did that, for some reason, I'd been very callous with the way I'd cut my pattern pieces. They didn't quite match, so I had to trim them to match, which meant that I kind of shrunk the size of the pocket. So this is the result. I think that it looks really cool. Like, I love the little, even if you were to see the little peep of a different colour in the side, I think that only adds to the charm of the dress. And I love that it has pockets. However, because of that error, the pockets ended up being quite freaking small, which is really annoying. I wished that I hadn't done that, but it is still way more wearable than when it didn't have pockets. It just means that my phone sticks out a little bit from my pocket, and it is something that I can go back and fix later. So they're still like innumerably improved. Very impressed with this. I've never added pockets to something that's already existed before. I've made pockets before for other dresses, but I've never added pockets to a new thing. So that's a new skill that I have. I want to hone it a little bit, and almost even maybe, just playing with this as an idea, for a Christmas present, like a sustainable Christmas present, what if I give somebody a voucher for like adding pockets to something? Because something that everybody freaking hates, especially women on women's clothing, is that they don't often have pockets. So what if I gave people an added pockets voucher for Christmas where they could give me any item of clothing that they had and I could add pockets to it for them? I think that'd be an amazing. So anyway, I need to get better at making pockets, and then I can offer that as a present to people because I think it's pretty freaking cool. I would give myself a 6 out of 10 for this because everything was fulfilled. I just didn't think of the pockets. And also maybe I want to make my own pocket outline in the future, my own pocket pattern, because I want them to be massive. Like, I need them to be really freaking, I don't care, I need them to be big. So maybe I should make my own pocket pattern. A challenge. And then finally, this dress. I love this dress. This is a hand-me-down from my friend Ariel. It wasn't the right size for her and I really enjoyed it. However, I was so aware how well made this dress was, because again, it was from a really nice sustainable brand called Frank and Oak. Really, really well made dress. And I loved the fabric. I loved I don't know, I just loved wearing it. But I was also aware that it just didn't look as good as I felt in it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I felt really nice in it. I wanted to wear it all the time. But when I looked in the mirror, I was like, something's missing. There's no je ne sais quoi. There's no interest here. It feels like my basic throw-on dress. I wanted, I don't know, I just wanted something a bit extra because I'm a bit extra. And as you might have remembered from one of my other videos, I failed at making a Ganni top. So a Ganni top is like one of these very fashionable tops that were in fashion a few months ago, but I guess they should still be in fashion. I'll be annoyed if they're not. And I really wanted to make one of my own, and I just didn't like the pattern that I used. I made a mock-up and I didn't like it, and I kind of abandoned the idea. And then I realised the shape of this dress was very similar to a Ganni blouse or a Ganni dress. It just didn't have the ties. So I was like, I'm going to add the ties. So I turned the dress inside out, I laid it down, and I was like, I'm just going to measure finding the middle, and then I'll just do a really big cut down the middle. I'll take my scissors to it and I'll do a big slash, and it will be great. I made those marks, and just before I started cutting, it occurred to me that I was about to cut a striped dress, which meant they already had an inbuilt system for finding where the middle was and a perfect straight line. So what was I doing trying to invent my own straight line? And I'm really glad I noticed that, because it turns out my original line was really skewy. I don't know why, it was really off. So I ended up cutting down the grain line down the stripe of the front of the dress, and that worked out perfectly. Then I just gave it a little bit of a zigzag stitch the whole way round so it wouldn't fray. I did flirt with the idea of leaving that raw edge out because I thought the thread colour that I picked looked really cool, and I kind of didn't mind it how it was. But in the end, I just thought this is going to fray, like when I wash it, I just know it is. So I needed to turn it in, really. So I did in the end. Now, at this stage, I had also taken out the lining of the dress, or the bottom part of the lining of the dress, because I realised it was in this beautiful burgundy colour, and that was exactly the colour that would look sick with the dress ribbons, and I didn't really need the lining. I didn't add anything to it. It's just like makes you feel a bit fancy, I guess. What better way to colour match a dress than to colour match it with the actual fabric from the lining it was made from? So I ended up cutting out 6 strips and using what is called a bias maker, which is just this little metal tube that folds it in for you to make ribbons. I ironed them, I pegged them, I sewed them. This took way longer than I was expecting. I don't know why it took so long to make ribbon, but it did. And anyway, I ended up spacing them out along the front of the dress, and voila, the rest is history. This is the dress that I've worn the most since I did the alterations. I am wearing it 24/7. It is so comfy in this heat, and I feel like I can close it enough that it doesn't feel exposing if I don't know, some of the dresses that I've seen like that, like they have like quite a big gap, and I didn't want that. I wanted it to be more of like a, oh, peekoo, you can see my top underneath, or maybe a little bit of my flesh. So yeah, I really like the way it fits, mainly because I guess it was oversized to begin with, so maybe that's what contributed. But I'm really, really happy with this, and I especially like this colour I chose to line the ribbon with. It kind of makes it look more homemade, but I decided that I didn't care about that. I know that maybe if I'd used burgundy, it would have looked a little bit more like it had been shop bought and a little bit better finished, but I like it. And I don't mind that it looks homemade, because it was homemade. And if people ask me, did you make that? I'll go, oh no, my light's gone. My light's gone, so maybe that's my cue to shut up. I think I'm going to give that make a 8 out of 10, because it could have been neater, but it's actually made it the most functional of all the dresses. It's transformed like how excited I am about it and how much I wear it. And it's also solved a shopping craving in me to have a Ganni dress. I now feel fulfilled. I don't need one. I've got this. It was in my wardrobe the whole time. The whole time. The whole time. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to follow more of my hashtag journey into not buying clothes, not even secondhand this year, you can watch any of these videos. This video is made possible by the Gumption Club, who tip me per video to make sure these videos keep happening. And remember, if you've got the urge for novelty and newness, it might be waiting for you in the wardrobe of your own house. Shopping doesn't have to be the answer. Right, Frog's Dog out.